All right, we're going to continue our study in Gospel according to Luke, the case files of Dr. Luke. Turn this morning with me to Luke chapter 19, verse 45. Luke 19:45. How clean is your temple? I almost gave this another title. I almost gave it the title that how is my wife and the Lord most alike? And that is when they get mad, they just clean everything in sight. That's what my wife does. Anyway, we saw last week, kind of get our context together here, we saw last week that Jesus was received as the king. Remember, he came in mounted on it's kind of an odd coronation that he comes in on the back of a young donkey. And so they've installed him as king in their minds. What would be your first act if you were king? If somebody says, okay, what's the first thing you're going to do? Most kings would look for a throne, or they would look for somebody in charge. Let's get this thing rolling for me. But that's not what Jesus does, and it's not why Jesus came. He is going to reject this title, and I've told you this many times, and I say it over and over again because it's really, really important. The people misjudged Jesus' intentions. They did not really grasp the purpose for him being here. What happened was they transposed what they wanted onto Jesus. John MacArthur wrote something about it. I'm going to read it real quick. Instead of attacking Rome, Jesus attacked Judaism. Instead of being a conqueror, he was a confronter. Instead of promoting revolution, he preached righteousness. And instead of clearing out the enemy without, he cleaned out the enemy within. First thing that King Jesus does is he does a little housekeeping. He cleans out the house, and he did it with a lot of zeal. Let's read about it. Luke chapter 19, verse 45. And Jesus entered into the temple and began to cast out those who were selling, saying to them, "It is written, and my house shall be a house of prayer, but you have made it into a robber's den." And as he was teaching daily in the temple, but the chief priests and the scribes and the leading men among the people were trying to destroy him. And they could not find anything that they might do, for all the people were hanging upon his words. Let's begin with this thought. It is easily overlooked sometimes, and that is, number one, is that my worship should be a first stop priority. A first stop priority. I heard about two guys, they were out fishing. It was pouring rain. Lightning's clapping around. They're just kind of hunched over, trying to get a little protection from the rain. And finally he looks back and he says, "Doug," he says, "to tell you the truth, it's Sunday and we should have stayed home and went to church." He says, "You're probably right." He said, "I could have stayed home, but I couldn't went to church." He said, "Why couldn't you have went to church?" He said, "Oh, my wife is deadly sick today. My wife is deadly sick." That is the attitude that a lot of people take, right? I heard about a pastor who was visiting a guy trying to get him to come to church, and the guy was just a sports freak. He went to football in the fall, basketball in the winter, baseball in the spring and the summer, all of it. He was always at a ball game somewhere. And the preacher says, "Yeah, I know that eats up a lot of time." He said, "I used to be that way." He says, "I finally just got fed up with it. I quit the sports business once and for all." And he says, "Why in the world did you do that?" He said, "Well, I found out that every time I went, they asked me for money, and that the people that I sat around didn't seem very friendly to me, and the seats were hard and they were not comfortable. And I went to all these games, and the coach never one time spoke to me or visited with me. And it was just always something like that. The referee made a decision I didn't agree with, so I just couldn't keep going. And I suspected that I was sitting around a bunch of hypocrites too, because they just came to see their friends or what everybody was wearing. They weren't really interested in it. And every once in a while a game would go into overtime. I can't have it wasting my time and going over a little bit. And the band played some song that I didn't like. I have a certain type of song that I liked, and it seemed that the games were never scheduled when I wanted. They were always scheduled when I wanted to do other things. And to be honest with you, I was just taken to too many games when I was a kid. My parents drugged me to all these games, and it just burnt me out on it. But anyway, I didn't want to take my kids to the game because I wanted them to be able to choose whatever sport was their favorite sport for them. The guy was at church the next Sunday, by the way. Worship should be a priority. The A one in this, put down. Jesus shows me that there is an essential place to go if I'm interested in pleasing God. Verse 45, it says, and he entered into the temple. You ever watch those old westerns? The old guy comes into town, he's tired and he's dusty and all this thing. He swings off of that horse and he wraps it like twice around it. I don't know why horses didn't get away all the time, because they just wrap it like twice, don't they? And and what does he say? Where's the saloon? That's what they want. Where's the saloon? Every Western's like that. Listen to me. The first place that Jesus entered when he went into any town was he found the temple, the synagogue. He found the place of worship. Why? Because that is where you worship God. The people had just greeted him as king, and Jesus is more interested in the worship of God than the attention of these people that they're giving him, okay? There have been many people that acclaim him as king, but they failed to worship him. That happens still, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I mean, I see it all the time, and I never comment on this. I don't want to give people a hard time, but it tickles me. People that are in our community even, and they'll get on Facebook, and they'll talk about, oh, how wonderful God is, and God just a blessing, and the world is just a better place when God's in control, and just meme after meme, and so they ain't been in church in 100 moons. I'm like, really? That's exactly what Jesus is dealing with here. He is showing us a model that when it is time to go to worship, you find that place. You find that essential place. Just put the B one, it'll help you. The temple was a daily thing with Jesus. Luke 19:47. And he was teaching daily in the temple. Daily in the temple. I got a couple of sites that I go to for fishing and hunting, just guys commenting and things like that. And it's a forum, is what it is. And it's happened on both of them, and it's weird to me because there's these guys that are on there and they're posting all the time and they're telling stories and they're answering these people, and all of a sudden, and then they'll pop up one day and they'll say, man, I think I'm going to dust off my fishing rods or dust off my guns. I haven't been hunting in 2 years. I haven't been fishing in 3 years. And I'm like, what are you doing on this forum? In other words, you're just pretending to be a fisherman. You're just pretending to be a hunter. Because guess what? I'd tell you this about a hunter, a fisher, a golfer, a shopper, whatever you want to call yourself. They do those things. They go shopping. They go hunting. I'm telling you guys, the temple was a daily thing with the Lord. He shows us not only is there an essential place, but it is a regular thing that happens in your life. Let's move on to number 2. I learned in this story that God's house is a place to show reverence, a reverence. Jesus walked in that place, and what he saw brought his blood to a boil, okay? And we're going to see what the actions were, but really the biggest thing is about the attitude that he found there. And it's an attitude of selfishness. It's an attitude of it being about me. I can profit from this. I can get something out of this, rather than worship being, I want to serve God and I want to do something through this, okay? So it's really about attitude. But so in your A1 there, put this, be careful not to use God for selfish reasons. There were no doubt thousands of Jewish worshipers milling around in the outer court. This would be called the court of the Gentiles. The court of the Gentiles were allowed in there, so maybe the Jews in their mind thinking, well, if you let a Gentile in here, you might as well make a marketplace out of it, because that's the way they felt about them. But it was not the case. So all of them are there. And in the few decades leading up to this moment in time, the outer court had become a religious marketplace. A religious marketplace. It was never intended for that. It was to be a place of reverence, a place where you quieted down, a place where you got ready for what was going to happen inside, okay? As a matter of fact, this court of the Gentiles became known as the Bazaar of Annas. The high priest, Annas. It became a bazaar, a circus, a marketplace, whatever word you want to give to that, a mall, in that it became the chief priest and his associates This is where the temple franchises were. Let that settle in. Yes, franchises. The people that sold the goods there actually bought into this. They had to buy a franchise. They bought the right to concessions. That would be a good way to think about it. To the concessions that were going on there. It's crazy when you think about it. I mean, some of them would sell sacrificial animals. They would sell the doves and the sheep and the other things. Others peddled wine, or they peddled food or oil or salt, just all kinds of things. It is literally the bazaar of Annas. Others were money changers. Of course, you had people coming from different cultures and different countries, so therefore they were bringing their money, and it needed to be converted into the money that was, because you had to have the right currency in the right denomination. In addition to paying for the rights, paying for the franchise, guess what? The house, the boss, the Ananias chief priest and all of his cronies, they got a cut of the profits as well. According to Levitical law, any animal that came for sacrifice had to be approved by the priest. You know where this is going, right? They would never approve any animal that wasn't bought in their little courtyard, that wasn't purchased. This is a racket. That is the only way to describe it. It is a racket. You walked in there and they would say, oh, that sheep doesn't look good, but I got a good model right over here. If you'll step over here, I'll say, look, it's only been sheared one time, okay? It's perfect. It doesn't have a blemish. Oh, look at these doves that I have. And that is the way that they did it. According to historian Alfred Ederfram, he said that a person would often have to pay up to 10 times market value in the marketplace. To top it all off, for the money exchangers, if you had an offering that you wanted to give, and they gave cash offerings too, that you had to have the exact amount or you were charged a 25% surtax. When Jesus calls this place a robber's den, he is speaking literally. It is nothing but a charade. It is nothing but a mess, okay? There was another act of disgrace that was going on here. It's kind of lost in the text. And it says in Mark chapter 11, verse 16, and he would not permit anyone to carry goods through the temple. Because the temple was by the east gate, a lot of the people, the courtyard, the court of the Gentiles became a shortcut. So they were not doing anything to do with worship, but it would be like this. Suppose somebody scheduled a aerobics class back in the fellowship hall at 11:30 on a Sunday morning. And to get into the fellowship hall, they just start coming through this door. It's more convenient. They park here, they come through. And so I'm up here preaching, you're back there worshiping, and all of a sudden the doors open up, and here come these folks through here just parading through. That is exactly what they're talking about here. It was a complete disgrace for the temple. And when Jesus cleaned house, one of the things that he did, those shortcut artists were not allowed to come on. They were not allowed to come. Matter of fact, the Bible tells that he made them drop this stuff and leave it right where it lay. So when you're be careful that you're not a shortcut artist. A shortcut artist. You know, there's still a lot of them, okay? They come to church on a Sunday morning and feel that's a shortcut to getting close to God. There are no shortcuts to developing a deep relationship with God. There are a lot of folks, and listen, you think it's funny because you are here a lot, you understand the basics. There are people who come to church thinking it's a shortcut to heaven. Listen, friend, this church is not the way to heaven. It teaches you about the way to heaven, and that is Jesus Christ. If you don't have a relationship with him, there are no shortcuts. So Jesus took care of the swindlers and all that, but he also took care of the shortcut artist. So this third one is really kind of the meat of the sermon. Jesus is zealous about God's temple. Jesus is zealous about God's temple. Matthew 21:12. Listen to what Jesus had. It's got a little more detail than Luke did. And Jesus entered the temple and cast out all those who were buying and selling in the temple and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. Zeal. That's a word we don't often use today. What does zeal mean? Let me give you some other synonyms, okay? enthusiasm, passion, heart, fanaticism, like being a fan. You know, you got zeal, craze, fire. All of those are good words to describe how Jesus felt about what he saw when he got in there. Now, I want you to think about this picture that I painted. It's almost like a mobster kind of organized crime, isn't it? I mean, it's what it's kind of like. So these franchisees and the marketplace people that are in there, they're a tough crowd. But I want to point this out. Nobody can stop the zeal of God. That's the A one in your notes. Nobody can stop the zeal of God. So these tough guys, these people that would have had people to back them up, they didn't mess with Jesus. Why? Because the zeal of God cannot be stopped. But not only those people, but the people in charge. Verse 47, Luke chapter 19. And he was teaching daily in the temple, but the chief priests and the scribes and the leading men, none of them among the people were trying to destroy him, and they could not find anything that they might do, for all the people were hanging upon his word. I find it interesting that those in charge are unable to stop Jesus. They're unable to get in his way. The house cleaning, the daily teaching, none of that. This was a large, lucrative enterprise. You would think that somebody would rise up against Jesus, but they do not. In just a few days, they're going to execute him. In just a few days. But now they're unable to lay a finger on him. I mean, how can that be? Think about it. The high priest, the chief priest, the temple guards, the merchants, the people that were coming and going, the temple goers. Nobody could stop him. How is that? He answered that in Luke 10:18. No one has taken my life away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. They couldn't do anything to him that he did not allow. Guys, there's an implication here, because sometimes we think, well, Jesus got murdered for my sake. That's really not what happened, okay? Nobody can stop the zeal of God. Jesus has a zeal for you and a passion for you, a craze for you. He loves you with that. And nobody could stop him from doing what he came to do. And that was to lay down his life for you. He and he alone had the power over his life. Nobody killed Jesus. Jesus gave his life. He willingly did that for you. He loves you that much. Jesus is zealous about you. And no one, including yourself, can diminish his zeal of his love for you. Oh, that's a good point. The B one is this: you better learn about the righteous anger of God. You know, the same fire that warms us, we get all warm and fuzzy about that, don't we? That zeal of God for us. Same fire that warms you will also burn you. We need to get serious about this. Jesus got red hot here, okay? This is a very intense scene. Other gospels tell us that he even formed a whip of leather thongs of cords that he used to hit people over the back and run them out of there. I wish that I were a good actor. Can you imagine that scene? Jesus walks into that temple and he just pauses there. It's almost like he's saying, where do I even start? And he tears into them. And guys, listen to me. You understand the confusion and the disarray that happens as tables begin to flip. Coins begin to roll around. Nobody's stopping to pick them up. There are dove feathers going. There are sheep squawking. There's cussing and ranting and raving. But I know one thing. They're all getting out of Jesus' way. And the whole time, when Jesus gets done, I can just envision him standing there, his fist clipped, his eyebrow, that whip in his hand, swinging and the dust settling, and the feathers landing in his beard. He tries to catch his breath. It is a tiny glimpse into what the judgment of Jesus Christ is going to look like when he returns. There will be nobody to stop it. Nobody will be able to do anything about it. It will just go down. It's a different picture than we think about Jesus most of the time, right? Bible paints a different picture of him. I mean, is the gentle shepherd, the man of peace, a lamb led to slaughter. We think of him blessing the little children and forgiving sinners, turning the other cheek, going the extra mile, long-suffering and patient. And he is certainly all of those things. Those things are so very true. And we are to take on the likeness of Christ. That's what we're called to be. It's gentle, patient, loving, kind, all of those things. But we don't need to miss this. Those traits alone are not enough, because there is another side of Jesus, a zealous, purifying fire that comes from him. It leads right into this other noteworthy statement. I must monitor my temple or suffer a painful cleansing. Uh-oh. In the New Testament, who is the temple of God? The believer, right? Right? I don't need to go back and re-preach that. You are the temple of God. Do you not know that your heart is the temple of God? My chief responsibility as a Christian is to keep evils from the temple, to keep nonsense from the temple, to keep distractions from the temple. This is our greatest battle as a Christian, okay? If you're not saved, you need to get saved first. But as a Christian, our greatest battle is not the ACLU or Muslim fundamentalist. It's not the liberal media. It's not our spouse, our parents, our children. It's not your boss. It's not your nosy neighbor. It's none of those things. It is the battle within you. It is with yourself. Our greatest enemy is the enemy within, and we must call war against it, okay? The Lord came to earth. Jesus came to earth to overcome the hells of earth, not to negotiate with them. We negotiate with them. We negotiate with them. When Jesus saw this, what does he do? He gets angry and he runs it out. By his zeal and his divine power, chases that away. And you and I need to take this up now. Listen to me. I'm going to take something that physically happened, apply it to a spiritual application here. There are lots of things in my life that are distracted from my ability to worship God. And I need to take those things seriously and see this different picture of Jesus, not just the loving lamb, but he's also the man with the whip that nobody can lay a hand on. And we need to feel that. The Lord drives out the thieves that are robbing God's glory and takes a whip and deliberately spills their money so that it's a visual and literally says, take these things out of my Father's house. There is a time and place to get good and angry. Put that in there. There is a time and place to get good and angry. There's a difference between godly anger and evil anger. I hope that you recognize that. Godly anger has good in it. It has love in it. It's protecting kind of anger. It rises up against that which would detract from God, against that which would hurt other people. It rises up. What is ungodly anger or selfish anger? It's what the best way to think about it. It's when somebody did something wrong to me, and I got my lip poked out, and somebody hurt my feelings. Evil anger springs from self and a love of self, that I didn't get my way. The fire of godly anger, it is an outward manifestation of a good heart, of a good heart. Ungodly anger is a manifestation of a bad heart, that I'm not controlling myself, I'm not controlling my heart. So there is a difference, and there is a time to get good and angry. That's the spirit which the Lord acted with, is this spirit of righteous anger. And when that was over, he comes down out of that. He doesn't stay angry. Outwardly, his eyes flashed with fire, and he was inflamed with indignation. But he did it all inside. He's wishing that it did not have to be this way. Inside, he's not angry. Inside, he's sad that this has to be done, this scene has distracted from the message of salvation. Good illustration of this godly zeal would be like a really good general in an army. The general does not love war. He loves his men, his women that are under his control, and he loves seeing them prepared and doing all these things. He does not love war, does not want to see harm come to them. He is not an aggressor. He does not go to war for selfish reasons. But when an aggressor arises, he rises to that challenge. And he will indeed become not just a defender, but then the aggressor. Do you understand what I'm talking about? It is the idea that I am going to take care of business because this business is about things that I care about. He doesn't delight in the overthrow of his enemy, but he does delight in the deliverance of his country and the protection of the people under him. That's the manner in which Jesus goes into the temple and cleans out, wishing it were not so, but cleaning house because it is so, and it's needed to be clean. Huh? He literally states the reason behind his actions. Verse 46, it is written, in my house shall be held a house of prayer. The temple is not a place for professional gain. It's not a stockyard. It's not a bank. It's not a place of crooks and swindlers. It is a place of prayer, a place of worship, a place where God is the attention. What does this all have to do with us? I hope you're getting it, okay? I am the protector of my temple. He's shown us that we need to drive out things from our life, okay, that will defile and profane our temple, okay? A battle must be fought. We've got to engage this stuff. It is a battle, okay? The fire blazed in the Lord over this terrible act. There is nothing lukewarm in Jesus about this. Did you notice that? Nothing lukewarm. There is an issue, and he attacked it. You and I need to pick this up. Here's the way I would present this to you now. What in your life is robbing you of true worship? What's robbing you? What is it in your life that steals your joy? What is it in your life that deprives you of an intimate relationship with God? What is it in your life that burglarizes your peace? What is it in your life that swindles you out of your spiritual inheritance? What is it? You need to identify the robbers if you're going to run them out. You need to call them by name. And when we find them in our spiritual life, guys, we have got to take this seriously. We've got to get rid of things that are in the way of our relationship with God. That is what is happening here. And with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, we are to attack those. We are the defenders of the temple of God. I have to do my own cleaning. But there's also a second part to this, because I am my brother's keeper. And there are times when I see ills around me that I need to cry out against them and I need to speak about. Ezekiel tells us this, Ezekiel 33. He heard the sound of the trumpet, but he did not take warning. His blood will be on himself. But had he taken warning, he would have delivered his life. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet, and the people are not warned, and the sword comes and takes people from them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood I will require from the watchman's hand. You and I have a responsibility as believers to other people around us. And if you and I don't live in such a way and don't have relationships in such a way that we can protect those people, then guess what? God says, I'm going to require this at the watchman's hand. Now, as for you, son of man, I have appointed you a watchman for the house of Israel, so you will hear a message from my mouth and give them warning from me. There's a lot of falling away happening around us. And there's a temptation when somebody falls away to think that it happened suddenly. I remember a place that I hunted back when I was a young man. It was a small field on the back side of the place, and you came down a road, And when you came around, there's this huge oak tree. There's a little field, but a huge oak tree. Almost stood as the sentinel, the guard, over entering that field. And I remember one time going back there, this has been years ago, I go back there, when I turned the corner, my sentinel is gone. It's laid over on its side. There's hardly anything vertical sticking up, just a splintered stump. And your first thought is, how could something so majestic and strong fall? But it didn't take me but one glance to see that it was rotten in the core. You would think that it was strong through and through by the appearance of it. So it wasn't a storm that took it down. It was years of water decay and insects and all of that. It didn't happen quickly. It wasn't that storm that did it. It was years of waste. My point in this is that you and I are often, we're hardly ever taken down by the storm. But we allow things in the temple that slowly rotted away, that pull us away from God, that steal our time with God. Don't let your guard down, okay? With the Holy Spirit's help, we need to learn from this, okay? To call out the enemies and then to cast them out. So the next time that you think about that time Jesus cleansed the temple, you need to think about, I need to be busy about cleaning my temple. Let's pray together, okay? God, what a great message, Lord. What just a great reminder. Because so many times we make it about other folks or we make it about what, well, this happened to me and it caused me to fall away. The truth is, Lord, is we allow rot to happen because we don't cleanse it. God, I thank you for the zeal of God's love for me. And we saw today that nothing's going to interrupt that. Nothing's going to detract from that. And God, I thank you for that. Because I do some pretty unlovely things at times. So God, thank you for standing with me. But Lord, I also pray today that I feel that same zeal, Lord, that I will rise up against the things, the hells that would get in the way of my relationship with you. So I pray for men and women here today, God, to take this message to heart and to be honest with themselves about what's robbing, what's stealing, what's in the way. Lord, bless us now with your Spirit's work. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. You stand up, guys. We're going to